Hello, Brother Monroe here. Welcome back to Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, and I'm here with our resident historical expert in all things naval, Drachinifel.
Hello.
Hello. So today we are looking at the winner of Division 2, the Bismarck, but we also wanted to look at the results of Division 2 as well and talk about what happened and maybe why it happened, and then we're going to get Bismarck ready to compete in Division 1. So on screen now, hopefully by the power of movie magic, will be the Division 2 results for everyone to have a look at. So in last place, we have Hood and KG5, who failed to sink any enemy ships. And I have my own thoughts, but do you have an opinion on that? Because I was surprised by the performance of the KG5, personally.
Well, we discussed this in the pre-show chat, and you said it's basically down to. I mean, I'm surprised initially because as a ship, the ship with the most guns and the most armor, and not exactly lacking in speed, KG5 should have done fairly well. But the way you explained it was the game has issues with ships that have different numbers of guns in different turrets for its primary armament.
Yeah, absolutely. Then that was the main problem I had with it was the single twin, and the double quads fore and aft really suffered because I think it's a minus 15% accuracy penalty on all guns for having a mixed setup, and then the quads had a minus 20 on top because they're quads. That's just how the game works. It's not necessarily fair, but that's how it operates. So the quads were at a minus 35% accuracy debuff right off the bat. So the twin was actually making the quads worse, even when it had fired all its ammunition, because it couldn't hit anything itself, because they don't share ammunition either. And it messed up the fire control because the twin would fire, and then the quads would fire, and then the twin would fire again, like too quickly. So it was confusing the fire control.
Counting as two separate sets of main armament.
Yeah, exactly. And unlike the Andrea Doria, which also has a mixed armament where it was the triples and the twins, because it was only the one twin, it suffered a lot from a bug that was present in 108 that caused it to lose its aiming lock and unable to get it back, which is a real problem if you just have a single gun turret. It seems mostly fixed in 109, so I'm kind of hoping that we don't run into that again. Not that there are any ships in Division 1 that I think are particularly susceptible to it, but yeah, KG5 did not perform as well as I thought either. When I was playing with KG5, it was kind of like, why am I not able to score any hits? What is going on here? So it didn't feel right. So yeah, we were chatting in the pre-episode chat about what we might do about some form of looking at KG5 adapted for Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, but you'll have to wait and see for that video.
Well, certainly it's something to bug report to the developers.
Yeah, I definitely have sent in bug reports about that, and they are aware that mixed armaments don't quite work properly, and they have fixed the aiming issue mostly. I haven't seen it very much in 109, so they have been working on it. But yeah, mixed armaments are still a little bit dodgy. And then next up we had Nelson in 4th, because she actually managed to defeat Littorio, which I was surprised by. I wasn't. That's the first time we've had a ship from a lower division that's been promoted up because they won their division actually take out a ship in the division above. So I was pleasantly surprised by how well Nelson kind of performed there, and she as well. She held Richelieu to only 2 points as well. Richelieu had to go to a tiebreaker to get the win. Then we had Littorio in third. She struggled, I would say, against the Richelieu and the Bismarck. And then the final was basically going to be Richelieu versus Bismarck, and Bismarck was able to quite handily defeat Richelieu. Ships found it really, really hard to actually damage Bismarck, was what I was finding. It was very hard for them to get a killing blow, which, given her history, I think is probably pretty accurate, because it took a large amount of sustained gunfire to actually finish her off. They could definitely hurt her, and in a real world situation it would be bad, but actually getting her to fully just sink was very difficult for the other ships, and those 15-inch guns really did hurt. In return,
which it's vaguely realistic, I suppose, because I've noticed one of the things with Ultimate Admiral as compared to real life, if you like, is that you tend to be able to sink ships a little bit easier compared to real life, but equally you tend to the ships tend to stay combat capable for considerably longer.
Yeah.
You hear what I mean? The combat capability, survivability is a little bit better than real life, and the actual stay afloat element is a little bit lower.
Yeah, and it's an interesting mixture, and it does definitely feel, when you're playing with historic ships, that I actually noticed when I was playing this division in particular, the first ship that managed to get a penetrating hit on the enemy citadel tended to be the one that won the match.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't, taking out engines or doing anything spectacular, that was a definite trend, and that was very much a part of kind of naval doctrine at one point, wasn't it? That there was this emphasis on getting the first hit in.
Yeah. And I suspect there's probably a few other things, playing into it, like the fact that the game is probably going to calculate a reasonable citadel volume.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the real life weaknesses of Bismarck, as I've said before in my videos, is that you could sink the entire ship without flooding the citadel. Because the citadel didn't have enough reserve buoyancy.
Yeah.
But I suspect the game probably doesn't allow for silly things like that. It probably just calculates the citadel relatively reasonably.
No. So if I for those of you viewing, I'll switch back to Bismarck itself, and this is where it shows you the citadel portion. So it's this darker red shade, which I know is not easy for everyone to see. I know that there's some colorblind people who can't see this. I am myself colorblind. I can see it, but if you can't quite see it, so it's right on this, right where the barrels of the rear turret and right on the barrels of the forward turret. So this is where the game says Bismarck's citadel is, which I think would definitely have enough reserve buoyancy. There's no way that these compartments forward and aft getting flooded would sink the ship. And in fact, I'm pretty sure in some of the battles that did happen. She had a flooded bow and a flooded stern, but
yeah, which in real life that would have been it, because the additional weight would have brought the overall waterline of the ship down to a point that the water then would have been able, with various shell hits above the belt, would have been able to cascade through and flood above the citadel, and then she'd have gone.
Wow. Okay. So, a real design flaw that not represented in the game. So,
no,
kind of giving Bismarck a bit of a a bit of a
Yeah, I mean,
bit of a boost
I
there.
was thinking Richelieu would perform fairly strongly, so the fact she came in second isn't a surprise. Littorio has this funky armor scheme, which again probably is not it's not the best thing for the game to represent, because it's got this decapping plate and then it's got the foam cement infill and everything, and that's not going to be represented in a game that's trying to represent battleships generally, unless they do a very specific niche update for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think with KGV throwing everything out, I personally was expecting it to be a KGV Richelieu toss up for top, but with KGV, putting itself out of contention, that's then that kind of rules that out. Hood coming bottom is not necessarily a huge surprise, but it's got the oldest guns, it's got the thinnest armor.
Yeah.
That was probably not exactly surprising. Nelson, Nelson, I think did a little bit. I mean, as you said, she's coming from the one down. I'm surprised she didn't do a little bit better. But then, if I remember correctly, I think this league was the one where we went out of our way to try and represent the historical penetration.
It was, yeah.
So whereas with Nelson's league, which she was kind of.
We did fix that for Nelson, so she did have her.
Okay.
Yeah,
she did have historical. Okay,
yeah,
fair enough.
Yeah.
I guess I'm a little surprised she didn't do a little bit better, but it is what it is. And as we've discussed so far, I think Bismarck coming out on top. I was expecting her to maybe place second or third. I wasn't necessarily expecting her to come out on top, but with the issues in the game that we've just discussed that are making her a little bit more effective than she would have been historically, it's not surprising within the game, if you like, because historically she was vulnerable to having her fighting capability knocked out, but very able to stay afloat. And with the game, as we said, kind of decreasing the chances of being knocked out of the fighting, but increasing your chances of being directly sunk, it kind of is playing to Bismarck's strengths, because she's got that advantage against being outright sunk, which is compared to historical, which is being exploited by the game, and her major vulnerability of being just knocked out of action, even if she stays afloat, it just isn't happening.
Yeah. But yeah, it was definitely an interesting division, and I mean, I know we were kind of Hood doesn't look like Hood did very well with a set of zeros, but she wasn't like completely wiped out every time she went out. She did actually do surprisingly well against Richelieu, but KG5 definitely. We'll look into that separately. So if you're a KG5 fan, don't worry, you're going to get some satisfaction, hopefully. But anyway, what we are going to be doing today is we're going to be getting Bismarck ready for Division 1, where she's going to have some very stiff competition, I think. So here she is, as she was in Division 2. I've kept everything as the same as I could from her Division 2 appearance. So really, we don't have to change anything, but it was from going from 108 to 109, they have added a few things, so it's more a discussion of how we're going to treat Division 1 as opposed to Division 2. So the first thing is there are a few new options. For instance, in auxiliary engines, we gave her an auxiliary diesel. We now have the 2 levels of battery systems that were there before, but we now also have a diesel electric auxiliary system. So if any of the Division 1 ships happen to have that, then we can give that to them. We were kind of going for Shaft 2 as the default, but there are now up to 5 levels of advanced Shaft. So I don't know if we want to change, because this was kind of the middle value for the propeller shafts. So I don't know if we want to change that for Bismarck now. It's a 1-5 instead of 1-3.
So what have we got on shafts?
So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It doesn't really give you any descriptions. It's just.
I think we'll just stay with 2.
2.
To be honest,
that's fine with me.
I would change her auxiliary though, because
Yep.
technically speaking, she was using. I think if I recall off the top of my head, she was using diesel. No, but that's all 2. Okay, right, we'll keep it on 2.
Yeah. So the 2 is a backup diesel engine.
Yeah. Yes.
And the 5 is a diesel generator
Diesel
powering an electric motor.
Okay, no, let's just keep it on 2 then.
All right then. The other big change, and this is probably the biggest change for the division, is Krupp 4 used to be the best of the best.
Yeah.
We now have Krupp 5, and modern. It doesn't say exactly what that is, but that says that is the latest technology of steel alloy combinations, and there are 2 levels of that. So for Division 1, how do we want to represent things? So Krupp 3, from playing the campaign, Krupp 3, that's kind of late First World War, beginning of the 1920s, is when you first get access to this. Krupp 4, it's again 1920s, early 30s. Krupp 5 is 1930s kind of era that you'll have access to it, and these 2 are much later.
I would, in this case, I would give Bismarck Krupp 5. And I'd probably, for most of our other entries, I would give them 4, because most of the other entries in Division 5 are using the interwar period armor.
Yep.
Whereas Krupp 5 are kind of the ultimate iteration of Krupp armor steel in this period. It really, in terms of material alloy quality, the base material is basically, you're looking at Britain and Germany. So in Division 1, it's going to be Bismarck and Vanguard with 5 and everyone else with 4.
Fair enough.
Modern is just, well, that's for hypotheticals, like 1950s battleships or whatever.
Sure. Okay, barbette protection. They added a 5th level of barbette protection. So it used to go up to 4, and now it goes all the way up to 5. So we had Bismarck on 3, which we can probably leave her on 3, to be honest.
Yeah.
But perhaps
it
when
sounds like they've extended stuff at the top end, which is good for building hypothetical super battleships, but it doesn't really change much.
No, hopefully not. All of these options have remained the same, and I'm pretty sure everything in here has remained the same as well. I don't think we got any.
The Citadel's still the turtle back.
Yes, Citadel's still turtle back. They did add Auto 1 and 2, so advanced automatic reloading. So when we're looking at rounds per minute, we can look at that. But I think that the Bismarck with it's the same that we had before, 1.69 rounds a minute, was about right, I think. But we can up it if we want to, and otherwise I don't think they've changed anything down here. They have added mines and depth charges, but in a battleship duel, that's not important.
No.
But I think that is all that they changed in terms of the shipbuilding.
At least we don't have to rebuild the whole thing again.
Well, I did before we started.
Yeah, fair enough. Just follow the instructions in the previous video.
Exactly. That's why it's brilliant doing these videos, because I can just watch the video that we did back and recreate a Bismarck. And by all means, if you're watching this and you want to use a historical ship, we have a whole bunch of them, and you can use them until hopefully the game adds shareable ship designs, in which case I can
they were planning on doing that at some point, weren't they?
I think they're definitely still planning on it, because they changed the way the underlying game files work to enable it in the future. But I don't know if they have to wait until they've kind of got all the hulls in the game before they can do it or something. There's something holding them up, but they are working on it. The penetration is slightly different, actually. I think they rebalanced the guns.
Yeah, well, that would
between
make
the
sense,
updates.
'cause we were having to do some really wacky stuff to get the penetration up to historical levels.
Yeah, and I think they've actually made it worse for that.
Great.
It's gone the wrong way. So this is the same setup as before, and we have slightly less pen, and armor is...
It's rated against the basic form of armor, isn't it?
It is. So here, I think we were doing the 20 to 500 meter penetration. So here it's saying you've got a belt pen of 34.4 inches, but against Bismarck's own armor, and 150% is kind of normal, average for a ship like this. If you go down to Citadel 5, this becomes 148. So 1.5, 150%, 1.5 is kind of your average top tier battleship kind of thing to worry about. And if you divide that by the 2.5, you get 13.7, well, 13 and 3/4 of an inch of penetration at 22,500 meters against belt armor.
Which is 13.5 at 22,000 meters.
13 and 3/4, so 13.76.
13.76. So that's actually just fractionally better than Bismarck's historical.
Oh, okay. Okay, then. That's all right, then.
Yeah,
I just
you have basically the same penetration, but at 1,000 meters closer range.
Oh, well, that's okay, then.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have seen some weirdness with 109, but to be honest, this was for my Japan game. The muzzle velocities seem too low on the Japanese guns, I think. But we'll get to that when we get to the Japanese ship in Division 1, because there's some weirdness going on there. But it is quite amusing because the guns kind of go up to their maximum elevation, which you never saw before, and fire into the sky, and then you get these shells raining down almost vertically, which I don't think is something that would necessarily happen historically.
Some of the Japanese, well, I think some of the Japanese guns, like even with the Congos, once they've been modified, were able to elevate up to like silly angles, like 40, 45 degrees. But which gives them theoretically a very, very long range, but no one was ever actually going to actively use it. But obviously in the game, it's just going to go, well, I can fire at this range, therefore I will.
Yeah, I have to say, what was it? It wasn't a Congo. It was based on a Fuso with the 6 turrets. And when you see one of those firing all those guns straight up into the sky and then plunging down onto some poor unfortunate destroyer, it's maybe not the most historical thing, but it is certainly fun. Just poor old destroyer floating along, not knowing what's happening, and then shells rain out of nowhere. I think there's maybe something that's going a bit off, but we'll talk about that when we get to, as I said, there's a ship in Division 1 that is Japanese, and we can deal with it then. But yeah, that was actually surprisingly simple to get Bismarck ready to go, and you can look forward to seeing her take on the other Division 1 ships very, very soon. Shall we tell them what ships we have in Division 1 so they can get excited? I think that would be a good idea. So we have the Japanese ship I was mentioning is obviously going to be Yamato or Yamato, depending on your pronunciation. We have HMS Vanguard, which we did debate because, of course, she never actually fought in the Second World War, technically, but it's not too hard to imagine a scenario where she was in service a little bit sooner, or the war lasted a little bit longer, and she was used in anger, and it means we get to see Vanguard versus Bismarck, which is just cool.
Yeah, I mean, she should have been in service a lot sooner,
Yeah.
but various issues conspired to mean that her construction was considerably delayed.
Yeah. And then we have the 3 American ships. So if you're wondering where all the Americans are, they're in Division 1. So we've got the North Carolina, the South Dakota, and the Iowas. The 3, well, fast 16-inch classes that the Americans had. So, yeah, you want to see Bismarck versus Iowa, it's going to be on the way.
Mm-hmm.
And as we did with Division 2, I can't make the Americans fight each other in a practical sense when I'm doing these videos. So they won't be fighting each other, they'll just be fighting the other ships. So don't expect to see any kind of blue-on-blue fights. If I can work out how to do it for a one-off or something, I might do that. But yes, that will be all the ships in Division 1, and you will be able to see Drachinifel and myself building those hopefully soon. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again for some more Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts.
See you later. Bye.